The opinions expressed in this video reflect the opinions of the participants only and do not reflect the opinions of the producer or Stanford Law School. Stanford Law School and/or Stanford University in no way endorse this video. Established in 1893 in Palo Alto, California, the Stanford University Law School is a relatively small law school with total enrollment of about 500 JD students. Interestingly, one of the first two law professors was former American President Benjamin Harrison. Stanford is also generally considered to be one of the top law schools in the country, typically ranking in the top 3 along with Yale and Harvard. The 2010 U.S. News & World Report Law School rankings place Stanford as the number 3 law school in the country, with LSAT scores, acceptance rate, and student-faculty ratio all narrowly behind Yale. Although the law school has been housed in its current location in Crown Quadrangle since the 70s, it has been extensively renovated and there are both money allocated and plans for new academic and resident buildings. Stanford has a long history of graduating leaders in all aspects of the legal profession, including the first female Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor and former Chief Justice William Rehnquist. Despite its small size, Stanford was recently noted to have produced the 3rd largest number of law professors of any school in the country. Additionally, its location in temperate Silicon Valley adds to its appeal. Former Dean Kathleen Sullivan reportedly remarked, "Who could resist a world-class law school in paradise?" Let's meet some students.
My name is Afam Onyema. I am a second year here at Stanford Law School. I was born and raised in Chicago. Went to college over at Harvard, and I am here now in Palo Alto.
I'm Annelien Stino. I'm from Belgium. I'm doing the LLM program in corporate governance here at Stanford. I have my law degree from Belgium University, and I've been working 3 years as a lawyer in Belgium.
My name is Justin Padot. I'm a 3rd year law student at Stanford. I grew up in the state of Maine and went to Wesleyan University. And I'm particularly interested in environmental law and came to Stanford in part because they have a good environmental law program and partially because I wanted to be in California.
My name is Dana Johnson. I'm a 2L. I'm originally from Chicago.
My name's Andrew Dawson. I was raised on the East Coast. I'm from Washington, D.C. and from New Jersey, and then I came out here for undergraduate, so I was at Stanford. So I graduated, worked a little bit in kind of hospitality industry for a conference center up in the mountains near Lake Tahoe, and I've been back for about 6 months. It's my first year, so I'm kind of the beginning stages still.
Why did you choose Stanford Law?
I was looking back on the East Coast, a few schools, but it was mostly a matter of kind of personality of the schools and atmosphere rather than kind of academic or institutional elements. I think the schools I decided were pretty similar in terms of the opportunities that they'd have, but were dissimilar in the cultural elements that you would either enjoy or suffer through. It was a tough decision to come back to the same school I'd been at as an undergrad, but I had gained familiarity with the institution, both the law school and the university at large as an undergraduate, and I think I was convinced through that experience that I knew what was in store for me, and I think the facilities around here were, I think, as top-notch as one could hope for in a university, either law school or undergrad. And the weather, the part of the country, it's hard to find. There aren't as many law schools concentrated out here, so the choice, if one wants to be on the West Coast, is a little more curtailed than it would be if you're open to the East Coast, and I think I wanted to stay out here. So that was mostly a guiding element, but the East Coast was open to me. I did have family back there, and I grew up there, but I think there's a certain atmosphere which is common to California in general, Stanford in particular, and I think manifests itself at the law school as well, that things aren't taken quite as seriously. Everybody works very hard and is very intent on their studies, but there isn't this sort of more crass competitive element, which I remember at least culturally from growing up on the East Coast.
So after 3 years of working experience, I thought it would be a great opportunity to come to Stanford, especially because they have a particular program focused on corporate governance issues. It's a very selective program. They only allow 10 students. So yeah, I think it's a very good quality they offer.
I applied to Stanford, Harvard, Berkeley, Yale, Georgetown, Northwestern, University of Chicago, and University of Washington. Yeah, yeah. I applied to those are the 8 that I ended up applying to. And then I got into all but 2, and then it came down to, but I decided actually from the beginning when I was even applying that I wanted to go to Stanford. That's where I wanted to go. I just applied to everything else just in case. Everything else is like just in case I don't get into Stanford school. But I heard back from Stanford actually really, really early into the process. So makes me kind of wish I had I had waited on some of my applications and saved myself about $400. But, you know, what can you do?
It was a tough choice between staying at Harvard or coming out here, and I had my doubts about California. I hadn't been on here much, and I didn't really know. It was really far away from Harvard and really far away from Chicago. But I came out here for a mid-weekend and just fell in love with the place. The people are amazing. It's a smaller environment. The weather is great, and so when I left here, I knew for sure that I was going to come here.
So you're the rare character who turns down Harvard Law.
Yes, yeah, it was actually shocked my dad. My dad thought that once I got into Harvard Law that wasn't going to be an issue. And I remember telling him that I wasn't going to go, and he said, you know, when Harvard lets you into a school, you go, whether it's undergrad or law school or clown college, you just keep going until they kick you out. So it was a tough choice, but I had worked at the law school when I was an undergrad there, and I knew it too well, it was too familiar.
How would you compare the atmosphere at Stanford to some of its rival schools on the East Coast?
I'm not sure where it comes from. I think there's a kind of a crowded mentality on the East Coast, especially in cities. I grew up in DC, and I think there's an element of having more space out here, and people don't have the impression of fighting for the same spots. There isn't this sort of idea that there are only 10 spots in this, and I've got to beat out my classmates for it. Somehow there's a more congenial, at least social element, though people are still working just as hard and it's just as competitive. I don't think it kind of sinks to a competitive personal issue. It's people trying to do what they want to do and not taking personally when things don't go their way.
I think that Stanford, unlike some of its East Coast some of the East Coast schools, is a little bit more laid back. There's a little bit more collegial. People pride themselves in not being too competitive with each other, and I think that my sense is you don't find that as much in some of the East Coast schools.
California is very liberal. It's very liberal. Stanford's very, very liberal, and it's difficult because one of the reasons when you come to law school is to get different opinions and different thoughts, and it's not stifled, but it's definitely the conservative opinion is the minority opinion here. And I consider myself a moderate, so I like getting different opinions and thoughts on different issues and seeing different sides of things, and you don't get that as much here. And yeah, California is it's a crazy place, but I enjoy how open it is, how minorities, racial minorities, ethnic minorities mix very well and smoothly, and that's definitely not the case in Chicago or Boston, so that appealed to me as well.
Is the LLM program large?
No, it's not a big LLM program, and it has only started a couple of years ago, so it's still developing. I hope they really enlarge the program, because it has also a great advantage for the JD students, I think.
Is there a little irony in taking a corporate governance program in the US right now?
But the same problems arise in Europe. It's really a global problem. You hear a lot about the corporate governance scandals in the US, but we have also the same problems in Europe and in the rest of the world. So it's really interesting to see how they tackle the problems here and compare them with the approach in Belgium. And I think we certainly can learn from each other's approaches, and maybe it's necessary to globalize the problem, because companies will get involved with each other over the whole world.
What has surprised you most about your experience so far?
Actually, also the most surprising is just the fact that my entire grade is coming down to this one exam, and I'm not really good at that kind of stuff. So my grades haven't been as great as I was hoping they would be. We all come in here with 4.0 GPAs, and that's not totally true. I didn't have a 4.0 GPA coming in here, but a lot of us come in with really good GPAs, and we're used to being at the top of everything. And then you actually get quickly they have a forced curve, so everyone quickly gets shuffled, and then you're like, wait, I thought I would be better than half the people here, but then you realize that you're not, but that's okay, because everyone here is still really cool, and you're still going to walk away with a really good education. So grades don't matter as much, and I wasn't expecting that totally.
What surprised me most is how comfortable I feel here. It's a really comfortable place from day one. I felt comfortable here, have great lifelong friends. Classes are interesting for the most part. And it's a vibrant place, but it has a peacefulness to it. And I've just really enjoyed my time here. I didn't come here expecting much. I didn't know much about Stanford, and I've just been pleasantly surprised.
How manageable have you found the workload?
It's a lot. It depends partially on what you do for extracurriculars. Just for the doctrinal classes, the required stuff you have to do, it's heavy. It comes and goes in spurts, I think, with certain classes will get really heavy at certain times. By the end of the first semester, the exam period was definitely the height of any kind of workload. And I went back up. I lived and worked in Lake Tahoe before coming back here, and I went up there to study before exams and basically locked myself in a room for 4 or 5 days, not because I think I needed to lock myself somewhere. I wanted to be somewhere with no distractions, and I got a lot done, and thankfully I think I condensed it into a shorter period than a lot of people did. And people, I think, are compelled to do things like that, to take sort of extreme measures to make sure that they have enough time and give the classes the time that they require. And certain people get by with less, certain people do more, but it's it's more intense than my undergraduate education in literature and philosophy ever was. So
I can only compare it with Belgian universities, and the workload is higher during the year because you need to prepare a lot, prepare for classes, doing research. But when I compare the exam period, it's more relaxed here than in Belgium, because the exam period in Belgium is really studying all day for 1 month, so it's different. Yeah.
The workload is surprisingly manageable, is how I put it. I had heard horror stories coming into law school about the workload, how difficult it was going to be, and people having mental breakdowns. But I found first year it was steady, but if you concentrated and paced yourself, you were able to do the work in a reasonable amount of time, as well as do other activities and events and hang out with your friends. And so I had long days, but I never felt overwhelmed.
Can you describe the faculty?
They're interesting, but not for this. They're interesting because of what they're doing, but not necessarily because of who they are. They're not like as interesting people, I think, as what I'm used to either.
In terms of charisma?
Yeah. I mean, some of them are cool, some of them aren't.
They're good. They're cool. They're really interested in the students. It's a small group, so they get to know you better than professors at a bigger school would. They seem really interested. I've had lunch a couple times with professors. I see them in the halls and talk to them. I'm not super close to my professors, but definitely I see them and talk to them, and they're always doing panels and hosting things, and they're very involved in the school. I appreciate that.
Have you noticed a difference in teaching styles from your European university?
There is for sure a lot of difference. In Belgium, they really lecture, so you just go to class, you take notes, and you study for the exam. There is much less preparation. With the result that you study everything at the end, and it's not so much. You don't study so in depth, and you are not so much involved in research, in looking into the matter yourself, in thinking critically. And I think here in Stanford and also in other universities in the US, they really encourage you to do the work yourself and to think critically, and I think that's really important, and that is a big advantage. Yeah.
Why law school? Where does your interest in law stem from?
Well, I was drawn to law because of the versatility of the degree and how much I wanted to go back to school, and I was thinking about business school and law school. And law school just, it opens your mind, it helps you become a better thinker and organize your thoughts and have good discussion. And the rigor of it really appealed to me. And not so much wanting to be a lawyer, but just going in and having those skills and taking them into law or politics or business or the nonprofit world or the legal world. So all of that, the versatility of it really appealed to me.
As an undergrad, I was literature and philosophy, so I had taken 4 years to study in what are usually pretty abstract fields, and the part of literature I was interested in was more in the philosophical side, or at least dealing with kind of abstract issues in literature. And I thought about pursuing that for graduate degrees, and I think there was something a little overly abstract, too removed from the things that you're that most people in society are concerned about. Most people don't worry about how novels mean this or that, but they do worry about freedom, civil rights, liberties, the role of government, the power of the federal government, and I think there are certain elements where the same abstract ideas were involved and implicated, and you had to think through them and think creatively and clearly and be careful in the same way you have to be in literature and philosophy, but the end goal was a much more tangible and meaty societal issue, something that would change people's lives or not change their lives, or would have more impact on a broader sense. And I needed that, so it seemed a good way to have both serious thought and an attempt to do good in the world.
The reason why I decided to go to law school initially was that I realized that I was, after working at an economic consulting firm that did a lot of legal deposition work, that I was more interested in the legal side of it than the economic side of it. So I decided to go to law school after that.
I was working in environmental policy for 3 or 4 years prior to coming to law school, and it really felt like the next logical step in order to do the more policy and legal stuff.
Is there a big environmental law program here at Stanford?
It's not a big program. We have an environmental law clinic, which is pretty dynamic, pretty interesting. We have only one professor, so there's not a lot of classes in the environmental law program, but the classes that there are good, and we also have a journal. So it's pretty well-rounded, but pretty small.
What do you plan to do after graduation?
I actually want to get into nonprofit work, international development. My family's from Nigeria. We have a foundation that's going to build a hospital there and a learning center, and so I've been working on that since I've been here, and I'll continue to work on that and grow it and expand it through the years. So it's not really related to law, but I've learned a lot here that will help me in that career.
Yeah, we'll go back to my Belgian law firm, Rebellius, yeah.
I'm not actually quite sure for myself. I could see myself doing a lot of different things. I'm kind of attracted by trial work. I think I'd like to be in a courtroom. I'm not sure transactional stuff is my forte. And in terms of the community at Stanford, there's a very strong public interest program here, and I think it's easy to see a clean divide between the public interest side, the private big firm or private firm side. And to a certain extent that is true. I probably would expect to be more on the private firm side, but I think the school is small enough, it does a good job at kind of integrating the two kind of pursuits. You don't have to be all in one or all in the other. There are workshops, clinics you can participate in, take classes. So I think there's a wide range of interests of the students at Stanford, and I think the school does a decent job at making sure all the students are exposed to the different things that our peers are doing.
Can you describe your fellow students?
Actually, everyone here is really cool. This place actually is really laid back, which is probably one of the most this really is probably the most laid back law school, like, in the country. In the top, like, of the top 10, this is probably the most laid back. Everyone here is, like, really cool. Like, there's no, like, serious, like, no one has, like, serious diva issues. Everyone's, like, everyone studies together. There's no, like, people fighting over trying to get, like, the best grades or whatever, because when you go to a school that's, like, in the top 5, everyone's gonna get a sweet job coming out of it, and people here, I think, understand that a lot more than, like, at Harvard and Yale, that, like, we're all gonna still get really sweet jobs and be able to do whatever we want. There's a big age differential. Like, a lot of people are, like, straight out of undergrad, and so, like, they're 22, 23-year-olds, and then some people are in their, like, 30s. Even when I'm, like, a little, frustrated with classes, I'm still glad that, like, at least the people I'm in class with are pretty interesting.
It's also a difference with studying in Belgium, because students are much older here when they come to university, or they have already been in college, so they have former experience in different fields, and they have also former working experience, and you can really feel that when you are in class. The questions they ask, you see that they have this experience, and they are much more interactive, and also socially they're very open, and I really like it, yeah.
I love my fellow students. I'm really close to my classmates. I think my class is especially close, and that really helped coming here. And we really get along. There really is very little competition. I'm just as happy for them when they do well, and they're just as happy with me, for me. And we're all rooting for each other. We're small enough so that everyone has such diverse interests that no one's competing head on for too many things, and that really helps. You know, law school can be a lonely place. It's you and your books most of the time, but to have people here that you really trust and like is definitely a good thing, and it helps through the hard times and times where you feel like you're a little too tired and weary. And so, and then they have such different interests, and I kind of live different lives through them and seeing them and what they're interested in. I learn a lot from people who are interested in environmental law or criminal law or international affairs, and so I feel that I'm growing day by day just by hanging around them.
What kind of topics do your fellow students seem to be interested in?
A lot of people come to law school not really knowing what their interests are, and sort of develop interests either during the course of the schooling or really during the course of their profession, probably, and sort of their careers after law school. There are a bunch of students who have come specifically for environmental law, and that's great. And there's a lot of people who are interested in human rights stuff. I think there's a cadre of people who are interested in criminal law, but probably the majority of people don't really have specific interests at this point and are going to do some sort of firm work and sort of see where that leads them.
With San Francisco down the street, the beaches, wine country, and Tahoe all nearby, do you have time to explore and be social?
We do have time to have fun, and my previous story about locking myself in a hole for a week to study doesn't properly, I think, reflect that. That's kind of an aberration. The exams are a crazy time, and people study more than they do at any other point during the semester. And at the beginning, in the middle, there's plenty of time to take a weekend, go away out. I ski a lot from when I lived up in Tahoe, so I've skied a lot this semester. And there's time to, if you want it, there's time.
My friends and I went quite a few times last year, not so much this year, because of people recruiting and doing interviews across the country, and I think everyone's a bit more on their own program this year, and so that's kind of taken away the spirit of everyone getting together and going out. But we do go out to the cities, more San Jose this year, San Francisco, but also out in Palo Alto, and we look to do it a little bit more before the year ends, and then definitely it's 3 hours when we have a ton more time.
Oh yeah, every Thursday night they have bar review, which is, bar review, like studying for the bar, but actually it's really like we all go to a bar and drink lots and lots. And like everyone does that. That's like every Thursday night. And I've gone a few times and it's been pretty neat. I live off campus, and so I don't get quite as much. I'm like married and I live off campus. So I kind of have my own social life outside of this place, but socially, there's a lot going on. I have a lot of friends. Like, as much as I don't want to admit it, like I've made a lot of friends here.
Do you get interesting speakers and visitors?
We do. Justice O'Connor and Justice Kennedy came just last weekend. We have CEOs come through, lawyers who argue big cases, politicians. And so that really is the unglamorized part of law school that people should really pay attention to, is who can the school bring in, who are the alums who come in and add their knowledge to your experience. And that's really one of the best things about law school, is the events that I've had here, that I've been able to go to here.
What are some of the drawbacks to going to law school at Stanford?
I'm a little jaded because I'm also not used to my final exam being my entire grade. And so this year, what I decided to do to balance out is I'm taking Japanese at the university. So I'm doing that along with my law school classes. And that's really helped a lot in terms of helping me focus more on why I'm actually in law school. And it's made law school a little bit more fun. Like, I actually want to come to school because I have to go to that class. And I have to plan my classes a lot more. Because of the way they structure taking off-campus classes here, I have to structure more what I want to take. I can't just sit there and take, social lawyering or whatever just because it's there and it's later on in the day or whatever. I have to pick what I want to take for a reason.
It can depend on what part of the country you do want to be in. I think there are certain things on the East Coast. The DC, the national center is on the other side of things, and I think there are certain advantages to being closer to that. For my own personal, I grew up there, that was all I needed. I don't need to be there for law school as well. And other than this sort of geographic stuff, my experience has not, I think, shown many drawbacks.
How have you changed in your time at Stanford?
I think like a lawyer. I actually never thought that was a real phrase, and I thought that was BS, but no, I seriously think like a lawyer. I like look at everything in terms of, like, from the way I drive my car to making sure I'm not gonna hit somebody and get like a tort liability to, you know, when you look at the news and, well, there's a lot of idealism out there. A lot of people are really, really idealist, and you know, they look at like, okay, why are we in Iraq, or why are we in Okinawa, or whatever. And it's neat being in law school and like being able to look at it and go, okay, this is what the politicians are thinking, this is what the people are thinking, and actually realizing that both of them have like valid, legit arguments about why they need to do what they're doing. And so, yeah, like being able to kind of think from both sides of the spectrum and like seeing an argument from two different ways, I never thought was possible, and it actually is. And I was able to pull it off in less than 2 years. So, you know, it's actually very beneficial and also I can argue a lot better, which is good.
Can you sum up your experience?
It's been pleasant, if I can use one word. It's surprisingly pleasant. I really enjoy it here. It's just very different from where I grew up, where I went to college. I love California. It's diversity, it's craziness. And I've had very few truly bad days here, and it's been a great choice. First couple of days when I was here, I wondered if I had made the right decision. But after that first week, I've never once thought maybe I should have went to Harvard. So that's probably the best thing I can say about it.
The courses are great. There are many classes you can choose from. Professors are really great. The weather is nice, and the campus is all you would want to have here. So,
what advice do you have for prospective law students looking at law school in general and Stanford in particular?
Have some sort of a plan. Don't just go to law school because it's an option and you want to delay making a choice in life. It's a lot of money to invest, a lot of time. And so if you want to go to law school, do your research, talk to people at the school, visit if you can, go to classes if you can, and take the decision seriously. Look at where alums are and where they're at, speak to alums from the school, see how strong the alumni network is, because that's very key to your success. But I would recommend it. It's a great, intellectually stimulating environment with interesting people, and that's probably not the case everywhere. I've heard stories about different schools being different. So definitely find an environment that fits you and try to relax as much as possible. There's a lot of inbuilt stress at law schools, and if you bring your own stress, you'll just add to the whole, you'll make your experience that much more difficult, and your classmates will react to your stress and your difficulty, and it'll be a bad experience. So come here ready and willing to work, but also ready and willing to see your classmates as friends and associates and not competitors.
one aspect that is, I think, very important here in Stanford for the LLM program is that they require 3 years of working experience, which means that you end up with people a little bit older and having more experience, which, for example, in corporate governance, and I can imagine in IP as well, is really interesting, because when you discuss among the international students in class, you discuss with people having practical experience, and that can take the discussion sometimes a little bit further than in other universities in the US, where there are many LLM students coming directly from universities having no practical experience. So that's an advantage of Stanford.
I think it's really important before you decide to go to law school to do some really serious thinking about whether or not the practice of law is something that appeals to you, and not just sort of the money and the security and the prestige of law. Because I think a lot of people do come to law school because it feels like the next step, without having given really any thought to what it would mean to be a lawyer. I think also taking a year off or a couple of years off is a really good thing to do. And it also is helpful because it makes you look like a more interesting candidate.
Don't look at like the stats and think that, okay, I only have a 164 and a 3.6, and so I shouldn't even bother looking at applying to the top 5, because those are actually my stats, and I got into like most of the top 10 law schools. Just don't become frustrated or think that you're not good enough to do it, because you never know if, I mean, they're looking for interesting people. It's not necessarily about the best grades and the best LSAT scores. It's about the people who they think are actually going to succeed and do really well while they're here, and do really well afterwards.
It's a time-consuming process, and I think it's mostly frustrating if you don't give it the time it needs, because you will likely be unsatisfied with what you've turned into these places. And unfortunately, just the nature of the market, there are a few spots, so schools are spending a lot of time looking through what you put together in an application. You want to make sure it accurately reflects the things you're interested in. And that being said, I do think there is a tendency, which everybody is subject to put a little too much weight on the reports, the rankings, all of those sort of, at least reputational concerns, not just in the form or in the official kind of U.S. news format, but also in, my uncle's partner says this. And I think there is some truth to these things. I think there are certain opportunities and aptitudes that these tests do indicate. But I think people would be happier and better off in their education and hopefully ultimately in their career by taking a more personalized approach and feeling confident to make decisions that feel right based on what you see when you go visit, what people are talking about, some of the incidental things about where it's located, what the architecture looks like, what do you think about the law cafe, all these little things which I think do accumulate into one's experience at a place and will impact whether you're happy or not happy. Will have a big impact on whether you do well or don't do well, and that ultimately is, I think, more important in most cases than where you go to school.